1:30 a.m. in the morning. The phone is ringing wildly. What could possibly be wrong? All the worst thoughts go through your mind. What has happened? Surely everything in the boarding house was fine. I was there 1.5 hours ago, and it was in darkness, and the boys were asleep. Ominously, on the other end of the line was the deputy headmaster. He was adamant, and he demanded that I meet him urgently in his office. No, it would not wait until the morning. Arriving sleeplessly in his reception area, the table in the corner of his office caught my eye. It was littered with half-empty quart bottles of beer and a selection of rather fine cape wines. Seated on the opposite wall was a rather dishevelled group of boys, including my head of house and members of my prefect body. Thinking that my head of house had been particularly proactive in his duties, I gave him a quick thumbs up before entering the deputy head's office. Why else would my head of house be up at this time of the morning, I think? All too quickly, the bubble burst. The boys seated outside had been caught red-handed by the school security, having had a wonderful celebratory party in the house loft, which was soon to be renamed Tom's Pub and Grill. Chairman of Rector, Mr. Simon Hammond, of Guest of Honour, Mr. Dick Onwangwa, Mrs. Huff, Headmistress of the Girls' School, Mr. Huff, Headmaster of Springvale House, Mr. Martin and Mrs. Martin, our invited guests, staff of the Boys and Girls' Schools, and the 5th form and 6th form seated here. It is my singular pleasure to welcome you to the chapel this morning. I'm not certain our guest of honour needs too much by way of introduction, for having taught at Peterhouse, I think he will be known to many of you. What I do know is that he agreed at rather short notice to be our guest here today. Rick, thanks very much for making the time for us. Equally, I do not think 2020 needs any real introduction. Notwithstanding this fact, I would like briefly to share some thoughts on the year with you. The year will most certainly be written into the annals of history as one of those unusual, unique, challenging, and eventful years. We have certainly been part of a defining time in history. My opening remarks were not from the pages of the John van der Riet trilogy of Spudbooks and the crazy life of living in a boarding school. Rather, they were a reflection of a situation I found myself as a housemaster confronted with many years ago. Tom, after who the loft is now named, was my head of house. So why have I chosen to share this with you as an introductory to a commentary on 2021? I do so in the hope that sharing the story with you, it will help to understand how or how not to react in times of crisis. On that fateful night, my initial reaction was anger, retribution, revenge, and waves of disappointment. All understandable, I thought at the time. These boys had let me down. Fortunately, at the time equally, I was surrounded by some incredible mentors who walked me through the process of managing a crisis. They helped me to understand that events of that evening were not about me, and in managing the crisis, I needed to pause, reflect, and then engage with the issue. I learned to appreciate that rules were rules, but in equal measure, I needed to understand that circumstance must be seen in context, and context must determine response. So as you reflect on 2021, I suspect those of you who are leaving Peterhouse will in many ways feel angry, disappointed, and very let down by the events of this year. I appreciate your sense of lost opportunity, your chance to show off your talents, your abilities. But equally, I want you to appreciate that there is a lot more to your lives than what might have been in 2020. In all the chaos and disruption of the year, there are invaluable lessons to be learnt. There will also have been some hidden gems of advice given to you during the course of this year. All of this will empower you to make wise and sensible decisions in the future. So reflecting back on the year, as a school, we must ask ourselves the difficult question of whether or not, setting aside the complexities of 2020, we've actually fulfilled our educational mandate. In January, the new look management team arrived on the scene, conscious of expectation, but excited by prospect. How little did we know of what lay ahead. Yet in March, our year was turned on its head. Fortunately, we were not alone, given that leadership, globally and across the spectrum of society, was about to be challenged in unimaginable ways. The year started quite normally with the announcement of the 2019 public examination results. These were, in the main, as predicted, albeit the IGCSE results, the voice, certainly exceeded our expectations. The newly blocked settled into their new school environment, and in many respects, the first term unfolded very much as anticipated. Notwithstanding the growing wave of concern around the spread of COVID, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere. For us, in our corner of Zimbabwe, the pandemic seemed far off and something of a media hype. Until March, when South Africa quickly became a pandemic hotspot. The closure of the school was to have a major impact on the way the school was to be managed and the way it was about to go about its business. In those early days, which seem so distant now, we were confident that COVID would be a fleeting thing, and by June we would be back in class, playing rugby and hockey, and enjoying all the excitements of the Trinity Church. Even with that as a thought, the Easter holiday prompted a complete rethink in terms of delivering lessons. Suddenly the words Google Classroom, Google Meet, Zoom, WhatsApp, Google Guardian became very central to our vocabulary. In three short but frenetic weeks, DigiSchool was born, and it became the foundation to teaching and learning in the school. Platforms were created and academic staff went through an intense and whirlwind training program. Start of the Trinity term was met with a fair degree of apprehension, and there was a growing sense that the pandemic's impact was going to result in a much longer disruption to teaching than had first been anticipated. So at the start of the Trinity term, the corridors of the school were quiet. The houses were empty, and the sports fields were pristine and expectant, beside the fact that we'd established our own championship golf course here. To compound the prevailing levels of uncertainty, there was a vacuum of information, and no one seemed to have any idea how to manage this pandemic. But fortunately, here at Peterhouse, routine had been established, and online teaching had become very much a part of our reality. By the start of the Michaelmas term, concerns grew surrounding the public examinations. Throughout this time, the school had to readjust dates and timetables at very short notice. The decision to allow the public exam classes to return on the 14th of September could not have come any sooner. The delay in this announcement caused considerable anxiety, both for the examination candidates and the staff. With only 4 weeks of teaching before the start of the public examinations, a crash revision program was embarked upon. This was demanding on the staff, given that they were now teaching on the two platforms. At school, they were in a formal classroom setting, alongside which they were also teaching the non-exam classes online. This has been our reality for the bulk of this term, given that the non-exam pupils will only be returning to school for 3 weeks in November. Added to these complexities, critical conversations around discrimination and racism have been started in the school. These conversations are ongoing, and the school, through the establishment of a working group, will review and adapt policy to ensure that any institutional discrimination is tackled at source. Additionally, the ongoing economic uncertainty in the country continues to stretch our resources. The ability of the school to manage its finances so effectively in 2020 has been quite remarkable, and credit must go to thinker Mark Whittaker and his team in the finance department. And the year is not over yet. and the public examinations continue until the 18th of November. For the rest of the school, the academic year closes on the 2nd of December. Once closed, the Michaelmas term would have been 21 weeks long, perhaps a single-term record for the school. One of the most remarkable aspects of 2020 has been the fact that the school has lost very little teaching time. What has been lost is that critical classroom contact time, which no digital platform can replicate. The personal became rather impersonal. We will not regain what we have lost over a period of 5 months, but we can only hope that in 2021 some normality will return to our lives. So at the end of 2020, the question remains, have we fulfilled our educational mandate? From my vantage point, I think the answer is a resounding yes. Have we done it conventionally? Probably not. Nevertheless, we can certainly look back upon the year in a realization that much has been achieved. This does not mean that we've got it all right, and we will, in 2021, need to ask ourselves questions on how we can build on the 2020 experience. What we do know is that in the staff there is an incredible resilience and grit. It took an enormous amount of courage and commitment to ensure that we got things right this year. At the beginning of 2020, no one could have anticipated what was to come. Yet, by April, the staff had embraced a massive and significant pedagogical shift in the classroom. The real heroes of 2020 must be the staff. In the classroom, teachers grappled and wrestled with new ways of doing things. Their primary objective was to ensure that pupils were not left behind this year. Secondly, to our community of pupils and parents who supported the changes to the new learning environment. It was not easy, and having the classroom at home was to introduce a whole new challenge to parenting. Under extremely difficult conditions, our parents have rallied to our support, and for this we are extremely grateful. It has not been plain sailing, but in 2020 I would like to acknowledge the sacrifices and support that we received from our parent body. To ensure that we continue to fulfill our obligations to our school community, our success in the future will be built around relationships and partnerships, something we have to some degree lost in 2020. Partnerships that link our parent body, our friends and patrons to the needs and aspirations of the school are key. In terms of strategic partnerships, I must take this opportunity to extend my thanks to the work of the subcommittees of the board, FINCO and VESCO, to the executive committee under the guidance of Simon Hammond, and lastly to the board itself. In this regard, I would like to pay special tribute to Stuart Magnussen, outgoing chairman of the board. He has, for 40 years, and in many different capacities, managed the affairs of state at Peterhouse in the most outstanding manner. His journey with the school started in 1980, and through that time he has participated in every level of school governance, culminating in his appointment as chairman of the board in 2005. His influence and impact on the school is immeasurable, and history will record that he presided over a time when Peterhouse has developed into one of the most highly regarded independent schools in Africa. We know in his retirement, Stuart will continue to see over the school, and he will always be remembered as one of the real Peterhouse champions. A mere thank you pales into insignificance given his service to our group at school. His name will forever be etched into the history of this school. We salute you, most faithful servant of Peterhouse. As always, the end of the year marks a sad time when we bid farewell to a number of staff as they embark on new journeys and adventures. Today I wish to pay special tribute to a number of staff who have collectively contributed enormously to the well-being and fabric of the school. Their reach has touched almost every pupil and parent in the school community, and they leave having woven their own threads into the rich Peterhouse tapestry. The school bids farewell to Andrew and Sarah Schuster, who leave the school to take a place at Culford School in Suffolk. Their work and contribution to the school is well documented, and they will be leaving a significant gap in the school staff. They have influenced and guided a significant number of young men and women through the school. Their insight into education is unparalleled, and they have an amazing understanding of what makes good schooling. In the classroom, overseeing cultural activities on the sports field, deep in the Chimani Manis, or relaxing next to the Shinga Dam, the Shoesmith imprint on Peterhouse has been substantial and significant. To Richard Hanley, who leaves Peterhouse to take up a position at Stan City College north of Johannesburg, we certainly wish you well in your calling. Your roots are deep in this place, and it would be my very sincere hope that the call of the Zimbabwean bush brings you back home in the not too distant future. May your new journey be filled with excitement, many opportunities and adventures. Richard, you have added much to our community, and I know you will be sorely missed by junior dormitory on the golf course. After a remarkable 10 years of service to the school, Jason Driscoll and his alter ego, Jeremiah, leave Peterhouse for Portugal. During his tenure at the school, he has had the oversight of some significant developments and projects. Through his input, the Peterhouse campus has become the envy of many. A team player who will always be remembered for his amazing and great sense of humour, Jason was very sensitive and always connected to the local community. He will certainly be missed, and we wish him well and his family every success as they start their new European adventure. I'd also like to extend my thanks to Crispin, Kane and the prefect body, and all the sixth form for your contribution to the school. My greatest sadness this year has been that my time with you and also the boys of the school being so short. But I do hope that in the fullness of time you all realise your true potential and enjoy your success. While acknowledging this desire for staff to broaden horizons, we need, as a school, to develop strategies which attract quality teachers through combinations of incentives to make Peterhouse their destination of choice. To this end, we've embarked on a teacher intern policy which we will identify talented individuals who are about to or have graduated and provide them with funding to complete their educational qualification while teaching in our classrooms. So returning to my opening experience as a housemaster and relating them to my 2020 experience, I share with you the thoughts of Australian educationalist John Hunt, who speaks of sunrise and sunset people. Sunrise people are energetic, creative, and see solutions rather than problems. If they see a wall, they think of a way of scaling it. Sunset people are those who see problems without recognizing opportunity and challenge which it may provide. The wall becomes insurmountable. It's been my experience this year that Peterhouse is full of sunrise people. While not suggesting that the year has always been a bed of roses, the school has coped remarkably well with the unpredictable. Furthermore, Hunt employs us not simply to accept conventional wisdom, but always be prepared for changes and learn to adapt. And this we have done with incredible success. He speaks not of the circle of life, but the circus of life. So as we emerge out of 2020, we need, in our school, to be creating an environment that incorporates the new normal and the ever-changing world of innovation. But we also must be aware of not becoming data junkies, because the latest gizmos are not ideas. Ideas come from human endeavour, and humans drill holes into knowledge. As you believers enter into a post-COVID world, you must focus on your individual talents, because sameness does not encourage creativity, leadership, or the development of new ideas. You as young men and women need to think out of the box, because greatness only emerges if you embrace lateral thinking. The greatest inventions of all time did not come out of homogeneous groups of thinkers. So I ask, where will the next Steve Jobs come from? And it would be my real hope that a school like Peterhouse. And so back to Tom and his merry men in the loft. Their challenge to authority was wrong, as was my immediate desire to seek all sorts of harsh revenge and retribution for their actions. So as you, believers of 2020, depart from Peterhouse, I want you not to think of what you've lost out on or being deprived of. Do not feel cheated and angry, for that will get you nowhere. Rather, learn the lessons of having to adapt, toughen up, and face a new reality. Take these lessons, use them to your advantage, and build futures which pay tribute to your upbringing, your education, and your talent. Like so many other times in history, you now are on the threshold of being able to make a difference. In closing, I share with you the following passage from Matthew 7, verses 25 and 26. Rain poured down, rivers flooded, and winds beat against the house. But it did not fall because it was built on solid stone. Anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey them is like a foolish person who built a house on sand. Our house is not built on sand. Conditio in Petra.